then a couple agents reached out to me, and I hadn't considered doing traditional publish because again, this is not, I, I wasn't trying to become a traditionally published author. Um, and I said, well, I guess I released it self-published and it worked well. When am I ever going to have an opportunity to see it both ways for the exact same book?
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Herne, author of Siege of Trebelin, and I'm joined by my fellow writer, Dirk Ashton.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dirk Ashton, author of the Paternus Trilogy.
And we are joined once again by the audiobook narrator and author, Travis Baldree. Travis, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
So last week we talked a bit about your audiobook kind of narrating career, and this week I wanted to talk more about your actual book. Do you want to tell us a little bit about literature and lattes? Sorry, not literature and lattes.
Literature.
Might as well be, right?
I was thinking about something else there. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's Scrivener. What is it?
Yeah, that's what I think in my mind. I think I was thinking about Scrivener the other day, so I was like, yes. Sorry about that. That's
it all interlocks.
That's embarrassing.
Legends Lattes is basically a cozy fantasy about a orc barbarian who retires from adventuring in her 40s and decides to open a coffee shop in a city that doesn't know what coffee is. And so it's basically kind of chill slice of life. When I was first thinking about doing it, I described it as a Hallmark movie set in the Forgotten Realms. And I thought it was going to be funnier than it was. And then it ended up being really earnest. So that's what it is.
Now, did you know what cozy fantasy was when you wrote this?
I hadn't a clue what it was.
Yeah.
I feel like the moniker has floated around a little bit, but I think it's been popularized over the last year.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of books that intersect with that. T. Kingfisher writes a lot of stuff like that. Paladin's Grace, Sword Heart. I think Terry Pratchett is basically cozy fantasy. People talk about cozy fantasy, and Terry Pratchett writes fantasy books that really they aren't about saving the world or battle or anything else. They're about real human issues or societal issues with characters that you like to be around, with a very kind of quintessentially British wit.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
Diana Wynne Jones, I mean, Howl's Moving Castle is kind of cozy fantasy. Studio Ghibli movies, kind of cozy fantasy. So I feel like it exists, but I think people are mostly just really looking for it right now because COVID and like the world just
that's
in
the comfort
general.
it offers. Yeah,
now,
that's fair. How would you define cozy fantasy?
Yeah.
Well, obviously, I think it's going to have some sort of speculative fiction element. I mean, I think you could have cozy fantasy and sci-fi, honestly. But in general, I think it's something that's ultimately comforting and that's human-centered. And at the end of the day, you feel good after you read it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, it's like a chicken soup book, right?
Yeah. You almost say it right in the title. I'm looking at Legends and Lattes on Amazon right now. Legends and Lattes, a novel of high fantasy and low stakes.
Yeah,
which
you
is
can have some stress, but it's not going to be. It's more personal.
Yeah.
More personal kinds of frictions and dramas.
There's no
like
blood.
Big world
it's not bloody. There's
violence.
not horror elements.
And like anything, I'm sure you can. I mean, you can fit whatever you want into it that you want to fit into it. That's the great thing about books is that there's not any real hard and fast rules. But I think it's like if you talk about a romance, you generally talk about the fact that it pretty much needs an HEA. It needs a happily ever after, right? That's like a kind of a defining feature of romance. And I would hazard to say that cozy fantasy probably just needs you to feel good at the end, and that that it feels personal. It cares more about people than it does about events.
Yes, I like the fact that you say that Pratchett's books fall into that category, because now that you say that, I'm like, yes, every time I finish a Discworld book, I feel great at the end. Like, I feel comforted. Right. I feel warm.
And his characters.
Yeah, that's right.
I love Death. Death is like the best freaking character. Yeah. And they're all it's obvious that Terry Pratchett is really optimistic about human beings. I think maybe that's another core component. There's like an optimism about humanity and about people and their relationships, and that ultimately things can get better, right?
Yes.
It's just this basic humaneness to it. And I think everything Terry Pratchett writes is that way. It's ultimately really humane.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's actually a
And
really good way of looking at it. Yeah, that's given me a new appreciation for Discworld, actually. That's cool.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, cozy,
Discworld's
the
great.
word
It's so
cozy
good.
comes from like cozy mysteries, right?
Yeah.
Cozy, even,
Because they're taking like
yeah.
a mystery and they're scaling it back to this very personal level. And
Mm,
Yeah.
there's a lot of these trappings there's the trappings that make you feel good, like the chicken soup element. Like,
Yeah.
they're trading
Absolutely.
recipes or we've got quilting or whatever. There's something small scale that you can still be invested in, but it's very, very personal.
mm.
What kind of excites me and really interests me a lot about Legends and Lattes is that you self-published this originally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when did it come out?
February
This
22nd this
of
year. This year, 22.
of this year, right?
Yeah.
And it became such a sensation right away. And a lot of that, I'm sure, comes from you have a lot of fans as a narrator, right?
Actually, I don't think so at all.
No, you don't think that
Interesting.
No.
they ran
I
in?
think there's very limited crossover because most of the people who found the book had no idea who the hell I was.
Oh,
That's
Not
really?
the
awesome.
faintest idea.
But
Um,
it became a huge hit right away, and people were looking for these kinds of things. And if you look at like the gaslat fantasy,
yep.
romantic fantasy. There's no cozy fantasy. So people were obviously looking for those kinds of things, found your book, and then word of mouth spread, and it became kind of an overnight sensation, to be honest.
Yeah,
You may
certainly
not,
I
I
didn't
mean, we
expect any
like
of
to
this.
say, an overnight sensation after years of hard work to write the goddamn thing, right? And coming up with a decent idea and getting it out there and doing all the cover work and everything else. But still,
This was a
um,
pretty short period of time. I wrote this for National Novel Writing Month
and
last year.
oh,
Really?
So there
cool.
was
Okay.
about what? November, December, January, February. So it was a little it was under 3 months from finishing it to releasing
Wow.
it, and it was a month to write it.
Okay.
Um,
Wow, that
That is
it
was
took
very
quick.
inspiring.
it took longer to do the paperwork with Tor.
How long
Um,
had you been thinking about wanting to do something like this, though?
so I did National Novel Writing Month unsuccessfully for years prior.
Okay.
This was the first year I outlined one, and a friend of mine, Avon Shore, who's another narrator, convinced me to do it last year. And so a month or two before, I was like, okay, sure. And I wrote up an outline and then did it. So it was a relatively compressed period of time.
Sure.
Um,
I just
so,
pre-ordered the paperback, by the way.
aw,
Oh,
Well,
there we
just
go. We
now.
made a sale live on air. I love that.
um,
um, now, one thing, so it became this kind of sensation, and it caught the eye of Tor very quickly.
so it
And
went through an agent first, actually.
By June, what's that?
It actually went through an agent first, weirdly. So that agents reached out to me,
Hmm.
not Tor.
Wow,
Okay,
that's
So
so
I
an
very
had
agent
rare.
three
did,
reach
but
out and
then,
were like,
but things happened very quickly. An
they
agent reached
did.
out to you, they pitched it to Tor and whoever,
Hmm.
and by June of this year, you were released it in February. By June of this year, you had um, Tor
Yeah, they
had
took
put
over.
out it had been put out again under Tor,
Yep.
um, and you have and people who are listening who are authors know over 7,000 ratings on Amazon, and that's just like unbelievably phenomenal. A good friend of mine, Quenby Olson, wrote a cozy fantasy called Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons.
Quimby's
Um,
rad.
and it's done really, really well, better than any of her books. She just released it just under a year ago, and it's got 627 ratings, which is very good. Paternus, which came out in 2016, still doesn't have anywhere near that many. It has over 500, but it doesn't have that many. Um, and people consider Paternus a fairly successful book. Um, so to give an example, cozy is kind of a big deal, but yours has over 10 times that amount
Mm.
in half the amount of time, which is pretty impressive. So I know you won't blow your own horn, so I'm going to blow it for you. Doo-doo.
Tell us more about so like that initial kind of first couple of months after it came out, and then that experience of the agent reaching out to you and how things kind of progressed from there. I'd love to hear some more about that story.
Sure. So I was preparing to release it. I got my final cover art, and about 3 weeks before my planned release date, I posted it on Twitter, and then Sean McGuire like retweeted it and said, "Oh, this looks really cool." And all of a sudden, a lot of people were interested in it. That
Wow. Yeah.
again, these are people that had no idea who the hell I was.
For sure. Yeah.
And so I said, well, I guess I better turn the pre-order on. So I did that. And the pre-orders were really good. And then it released, and again, it's all doing. I I only released this to learn how the process works because I work with authors all the time. I just wanted to do it because I like to
Mhm.
learn stuff.
And you
So
work with
I
a
just
lot of
wanted to pay for
self-pub.
my cover art.
You work with a lot of self-pub authors.
I worked with tons of self-pub authors and small press authors. So
Mhm.
I just wanted to see the other side of it. So this was all very surprising to me. The launch went really well. Shannon actually then read it and said, "Oh, I really liked this," and wrote a really nice tweet thread
Fantastic.
about it,
Yeah.
saying nice things. And then it started to proliferate on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and what have you. And I started getting fan art, piles
Whoa.
of fan art. I have
Do you have
so much cool
tattoos
fan
yet?
art. I do,
Uh-huh.
and
No way.
it's amazing.
You
It's
know you've made
crazy.
it when fans are tattooing
Also,
their
someone
bodies.
built a miniature of the coffee shop,
Sweet.
like an incredibly detailed miniature. Crazy stuff. Some sculptures, knitted knitted characters,
Wow. Oh my
really
god,
crazy
that's
stuff.
next level. Yeah.
So then a couple agents reached out to me, and I hadn't considered doing traditional published because again, this is not I I wasn't trying to become a traditionally published author.
Mhm.
Um, and I said, well, I guess I released it self published, and it worked well. When am I ever going to have an opportunity to see it both ways for the exact same book
Right.
and do it? I mean, so I guess why not? What have I got to lose, really? So I said
Well,
yes, and I picked an agent.
hopefully they gave you a nice advance.
It was really nice.
Good,
Um,
good.
so Stevie Finnegan is my agent with Zeno in the UK,
Uh-huh.
and she took it out. And within I think 48 hours, Tor UK had come out with I'm forgetting the name of the type of offer, but it's a timed one where basically they're going to give you a better offer and they want you to accept within a certain period of time, so they don't get
Yeah.
into a bidding war.
Yep.
And it was Tor, and I love Tor. I'm a
Mhm.
big fan of the way Tor treats their books, the covers they do.
Yep.
They care about their books and they publish things that I like.
Mm.
So I said yes. And then they went and did the rounds to sell the international rights, and they sold them to Tor US, which I was also very happy about, which means I get Tor on both sides of the water. I didn't know they were different
Yeah.
at the time,
Yep.
but they are.
They
They're
all
just
have
all
that.
owned by
Yeah.
Macmillan.
Yeah.
But Tor US actually has to bid for the rights to buy them from Tor UK
Isn't that
against
weird? Yeah.
other publishers,
That's
Yeah.
so
including
bizarre.
other publishers owned by Macmillan. This is a new thing for me. So I was surprised by all of this.
Yeah.
And then things got moving because they wanted to republish the paperbacks this year, which is a really short period of time for
Mhm.
print.
Mm.
Yep. I
So
just pre-ordered.
they
I
were
didn't
literally
see
getting them
when they're
ready
coming out.
before the deal was signed in order to save time.
Mhm.
Wow. So they were that
And they
confident
used
that
they
it was going to go
used your
through.
original cover.
In the US, it uses the original cover. In the UK, it has a new cover.
Okay.
And then I asked them to include the black and white of the original art on an interior frontispiece just because I like it and I like being able to look at the characters. Um, so yeah, the US is using the same cover art. It has some new typography and stuff, and it's Tor logo on it, other cool stuff. But yeah, um, the book is mostly the same. There's very little editorially different. There's some house style changes. I changed a couple of words, but it's basically the same book. But then I wrote a prequel short that also gets put into it for all the paperbacks.
Nice.
So they had some additional thing and reason to republish the paperbacks.
Yeah. They all have their own style things and, where they
Yeah.
prefer. Yeah. Oxford commas for
How do you
UK.
do how
For
are you using with M dashes and N dashes and exactly how many
exactly, the
periods are in an ellipsis that
consistency,
it terminates a
yes.
sentence and that kind of stuff. So, you go through that
Yes.
pass.
Yeah, that's even
But
hard.
it's
Mine changed through each 3 book. What I used for the dash, it changed in each
That's
of
one
the 3
approach.
books. Through
I
each
was going to
each of
say
them.
two things here which I find really interesting is first of all, this is just a really inspiring example of like you just don't know what can happen when you like actually commit to just writing a book and putting it out there. Like, we talk a lot on the show about how like a lot of authors just need to write and publish like lots and lots of books until something takes off. But like, don't let that, if you're listening to this right now and you're, working on that first book and you're like, oh, I don't know whether I should put it out or not. I think Travis's story is like a really inspiring example of how just doing something for the fun of it and just putting it out there, like you never know where that can take you, or like if that's going to tap into a particular vein or whatever. So, don't like hold yourself back from that. Like, just, yeah, I guess
Yeah.
commit to trying these things because you don't know.
Yeah.
And the second thing is that like, I'd love to ask what were some of the things you learned about this? Because you mentioned that you kind of went into this process wanting to see the other side of the fence and seeing what it was like for authors, because you have obviously the experience of working with them as an audiobook narrator. So you've kind of had almost the perfect vantage point for every single part of the process, because you've done the self-publishing, you've done the traditional publishing, you've had
Yeah.
like,
You've done the
deals in different
audio.
markets, you've done the
Yeah.
audio. So yeah, like just kind of talk us through some of the interesting things that were maybe surprising to you or useful for you to
Um,
learn.
well, I think one of the main things I learned, which is probably also a good addendum to just putting stuff out there and doing stuff because it's fun, is to always treat it like you're doing it professionally, even if
Yes.
you aren't.
Yeah.
Mm,
Because the only way you're going to capitalize on a lightning strike is if you tried to do it professionally.
exactly.
Hmm.
So even though I was doing this for whatever, I still professionally edited and I still commissioned the artwork, and paid to do it
Mm,
and paid for real art and went through the real process and did nice formatting on the ebook and on the print book. I set up an Ingram Spark print so that it could be in bookstores, even though I considered there would be no way that it would be in bookstores. Well,
Hmm.
guess what? It ended up thousands and thousands and thousands of copies in bookstores, in
that's
Barnes and
wicked.
Nobles all over the freaking country.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't done that and treated it like it could have happened, then there's no way it could
Correct.
have happened.
Hmm.
So just make sure your bucket doesn't have any holes in it before you stand under the rain cloud. Maybe it's not going to rain, but if it does, you don't want it all to leak out.
Yes.
Right.
You want to be prepared
So,
for that.
And
um,
that was before Tor, that
yeah,
when you were self-pub, that the paperbacks were getting into bookstores. Now that's really
yeah,
rare, even for a
it's
successful book.
super rare, and
But
it's
it's the
not
type.
something I could have
It
predicted.
must be the type of book that it is. People were going to stores and requesting it, and they said, "Okay, we need to order a dozen of these
So
in."
what happened was, because of the social media push, which also I didn't instigate.
Yeah.
um, a lot of this I largely think was driven by the cover art, because I think the cover art
Yes.
was very successful. I think it very clearly establishes the tone and exactly what you're going to get out of the book.
Yep.
And when you pick up the book, if you look at the cover, what you get in the book is the same thing that's on the cover. It's
Yeah.
not a bait and switch. That is what it is. That's the vibes. It's clearly going to have, it's going to be relationship focused. It's clearly going to be about a coffee shop and a baking thing. It's clearly going to be fantasy characters. There's clearly a little bit of a sapphic romance thing going on. And I mean, it is what it is. So I think the book cover sells it. And I think that made it possible to have the accidental social media thing that happened. But what happened on the bookseller front is that booksellers saw the same things and were interested in it as readers. And what you can do at Barnes and Noble, if you want to stock a book that Barnes and Noble doesn't want you to stock, because they don't usually bring in self-pub stuff. Even if you're going through Ingram, and even if you have a discount, and
Yep.
even if you're allowing for,
Yep.
destructions and not returns, they still don't like to do it. But what you can do as a bookseller is order it in for yourself, cancel the order, and then it goes to stock. So you can order in copies and
Ah,
convert them
interesting.
into in-store stock. And so some booksellers did that, and then the book
Wow.
Because
sold.
they
And once
loved the
they
book.
sell, you
They
can get
read it and
justified
they
to
loved
order
it.
them.
Yeah, they read it and loved it, and they
They
wanted
hand
other
sold
people
it.
to read it too.
They hand sold it. They said,
Yep.
"Hey, look, this book is cool. You should get it." And then when they sell, then they can order more. And when they order more, the booksellers that are regional talk to each other and are like, "Hey, I sold a bunch of this book. Oh,
Uh-huh.
well, we'll order it in." And so ordered it, and they sold the copies. So
That's amazing.
I could watch it on the Barnes and Noble site where you can search for the existence of the books. I could watch it expand,
Yeah.
which was really
Whoa. That's
weird. And it
bizarre.
happened
Yeah.
over a series of weeks. And then all of a sudden, the Ingram Spark sales went like that.
Yep.
Um, but I I didn't drive any of that. It was
Yeah.
all somebody else's doing, and I just lucked into it. I'm just here. I'm just along for the ride.
Did you do
But
any advertising? AMS?
um, eventually, I tried putting up I tried an AMS for like 2 days, and I
Yeah.
turned it off
They're
because
really,
I don't know.
really
This is nuts.
hard. Yeah.
I did put up a Facebook ad, which I thought maybe did something,
Yeah.
but I just did one, and that was
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I mean, that
Because I don't.
happens. That
It's
happens.
hard to correlate.
people
any
like
of those.
me and Jed have to like work real hard, but there are like Will has never advertised.
Yeah,
Um,
they said they tried some early and they're like, "This is
very early
ridiculous,"
and
and then
gave
never
up.
did it again.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
my advertising, as fast as it was to make the book cheap and put it on Kindle Unlimited.
yep.
So I made it as
Yes.
low as I could make it price-wise, which was $2.99 before you can't do KU, I think.
Right.
Is that what it is? I feel like
It's
Yeah, that's correct.
199.
or no,
What?
that's the royalty rate. You can't go
The
below
royalty rate
2.99
drops
and do
below
the
70%.
royalty rate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it drops the
So I
royalty
did it as
rate to
low
the
as I could do
70%.
and dumped it in KU because I was like, I just want people to read the thing,
Hmm.
Really, the
and I think
greatest
that's
marketing you
helpful.
did is probably the cover and the title. Like, you've
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely nailed what that book is going to
Yeah.
I
be
think the
about
cover and
in
concept
that
worked,
packaging.
and I think I lucked into timing because again, everybody's been in COVID for 2 years.
Yep.
Everything's grim. I don't want
Mm.
to. I don't want to read anything grim. I don't want to watch anything grim. I just want something nice for a couple of goddamn minutes.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I think I just lucked into that. Partially because that's what I wanted when I wrote it,
Mm.
because it wasn't that many months prior. It was like, boy, it would be nice if I read a lot of game lit and lit RPG and action adventure stuff, and it's always some white dude who's like 20 years old saving the world for some epic threat. And I just wanted to read something that wasn't that. Not
Yeah.
because I don't like that, that's cool, but that's mostly what's on my dance card.
Mm.
So I
You want
just
to
wanted
change up.
something totally different.
Yeah.
I wanted chicken soup book. So, and then
Awesome.
apparently other people did too.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's
I
understating it, I
can't
think.
I can't pretend that it was some, like, master plan on mine. It really is just, like, I just did a thing, and it really is up it's down to a lot of other people who got out and pushed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's also obviously you've written a great book, and I think it is. Yeah, there are so many great lessons here for people listening or watching about how, like, yeah, you just do the stuff that you find really interesting, but also do treat it professionally. Like, do get a great cover. Like, don't skimp on that stuff because that's all part of the process. And the sooner that you can kind of view that as a fun, creative exercise in to go along
Yeah.
with the writing of the book, the better it will be. And then, yeah, like stuff like this
Yep.
can happen. So
Yeah. Just
Ruthlessly
do your
edit.
best work. Do the best
Ruthlessly
cover
edit.
you can, and do some nice
yes,
professional
and that as well.
formatting. And if your first book is not the phenomenal success that surprised the shit out of Travis and the rest of the world, then
Just keep writing.
don't quit.
Write
Keep
more books.
keep doing
Yeah,
it
exactly.
because it is a
Also, I'm gonna
rare.
throw one more thing in here.
Yeah.
Read your
Yeah, go
book
for
out
it.
loud to yourself. Read your book out loud to yourself,
Yep.
because the amount that you will learn about what you do and do not want in your book will be
Yeah.
Mm,
very, very high.
Yeah.
It's very easy to skim things that you innately understand, but when you have to verbalize them, it really clarifies for you what belongs in my book.
Right.
yes. I've found
Yeah.
that painfully true from my own experience as well. So I think that's a great tip.
Yes.
um, awesome. So yeah, the book is not Literature and Lattes; it is Legends and Lattes by Travis
Av-
Baldree. So go ahead and check that out.
available everywhere, and the paperback is up for pre-order now.
Yeah, the paperbacks come out November 8th, and the hardbacks in the UK November 10th. And then there will be, I guess, 8 or some odd languages slowly trickling out over the following year.
Awesome.
That is wicked. Will they get you to do the audiobook narration in other languages? Just like learn how to
God, I hope not.
speak
That would
Spanish.
be really awkward. That would be really awkward.
That would be fun. I love that. All right. Well,
Oh,
Travis, thank you so much for joining us.
yeah.
Really
This has been
appreciate your
awesome.
time. And
Yeah.
yeah, hope you enjoyed watching or listening to this episode. And we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you so
everybody.
much.
Thank you, Travis.
Good night.
Thank you for listening or watching to this episode of Wizards, Warriors, and Words. If you like what we're doing here and you would like to help support the show, please go to patreon.com/Wizards, Warriors, and Words. And for a monthly subscription, you can get access to bonus episodes that you can't find anywhere else. Currently, we have 5 bonus episodes up there, and we're going to be adding more in the future. So you can check that out. The link is down below if you would like to have a look. And a special thanks to our high-tier patrons, Taylon, Daniel, and Lewis. Thank you for helping support the show. We'll see you next week.